Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
I brought a strange beast with me today, in terms of a camera, that is. Usually I like to travel light. I have my X100V or my X Pro 1 with my vintage lens, the 28mm Yashica, gifted by our good friend Tim Binder. But today I'm packing a bit of a zoom, so I feel a bit weighted down. I've got the Coffee and Garibaldis around my right shoulder. I've got a Canon R6 with a 70 to 200mm around my left shoulder. I'm not travelling so light. Let me make a picture. So usually the picture I make right at the start of the photo walk would be some kind of wide scene, wouldn't it? But today with my 70 to 200, I'm not used to using this on the photo walk. Let's see what we're going to get. I'll pop you in my pocket. So I've got this scene ahead of me of a telegraph pole just running sort of parallel with where I'm standing on one telegraph pole anyway, and it's running away from me. So let's see. It's a totally different kind of compression, isn't it? Neil, don't get too technical. That's not what this program's about. Right, f4, 320th, ISO 100. It's a very quiet shutter, so that click that I usually program to be loud, you're not going to hear it so much. Let's rescue you from the pocket. Every week brings a whole new raft of things I feel I've learned from and about you, and then about other people as well. And I know this week is another one of those weeks. The letters in the mailbag this week highlight that, I think, as we walk. And hang about. Neil started his sentence with the words, sound the alarms. He's going to try and sound very earnest about something. Batten down the hatches. Earnestness, alert. Sound is a wonderful thing. And my guest today in particular uses sound with her pictures in a way that I think I've been personally quite moved by. In terms of storytelling, texture and creativity, and how she's used it to talk really very personally about the pictures that she's been making about some strong subjects on occasion. Obviously for me to get all excited about sound it's not necessarily new or unexpected to you. After all, here we are, you and I, talking together on a podcast, sharing moments within our podcast. But I do want to tell you a personal story to demonstrate a little how sound is so potent to me. And I'm wondering if I've shared this with you before, actually. But I think as the months go by, I seem to be sharing more and more personal stuff, along with the photographic stuff. So apologies if I've told you this before, but I think it's very fitting today. On the night my mother passed away. Oh, steady on, Neil. Zoom lenses and a highly personal story at the start. Are we ready for this? No. Hear me out. On the night my mother passed away, I remember sitting by her bedside, holding her hand, and she was practically in a coma. And there was a wonderful nurse, a lovely nurse, and I wish I could remember her name, but there were other things going on that night. But I remember she had this strong Irish accent, and she was wonderfully caring and very good with copious amounts of, cups of tea. And I'd been talking to Mum for about an hour, and of course with Mum pretty much in a coma, there was no response. It was a very one-way conversation. And I remember saying to the nurse, Am I wasting my time chatting here? I mean, obviously she's not going to answer me, and she probably isn't taking any of this in. As she said, "Whoa," and I wish I could do the Irish accent, but I'll do it no justice. But she simply said, No, stop right there, Sonny. No, you keep talking to your mother. The probability is, she said, and I don't know whether this was for comfort or, having read about it a little more, perhaps she's completely accurate about it, but she said the likelihood is that she can still hear you. It's the last sense to go. And with that, I kept talking, and she kept bringing copious amounts of tea, and I think I felt very comforted about that. And so you see, we come into this world hearing the beats of our mother's hearts, and we leave, hopefully, hearing the hearts of others in a more intimate sense, I suppose. And that is why I am so overused word alert here, so very passionate about this medium of sound. And so is my guest today, Laura El Tantawi, who is one of those few photographers, I think, to have embraced sound design within her photographic work. She is a British Egyptian photographer, an artful bookmaker, a mentor, the first Egyptian to be awarded the prestigious W. Eugene Smith Memorial Fund Award, which, and I think this is very pertinent indeed, honours photographers whose work follows the tradition of Eugene Smith's humanistic photography and dedicated compassion. And I think that is a key word when you really start to study Laura's work as well. Compassion.
Today on the Photowalk.
And I definitely believe that if you make an image from a place of authenticity and honesty, that people really feel that and they come to it and it resonates with them.
Stories of life told by photographers. Today those stories come from Laura El Tantawi, with a little extra help too from former guests and contributors, Mally Davis, John Carmichael, some wonderful patrons from the Zoom meet, and a voice we haven't heard before, Valerie Koo, and you. It's a special and unique podcast made out on location. Me with my camera, you with yours, earbuds in, a flask of coffee, a packet of my favourite Garibaldis, greatly depleted after the week away with family, and a mailbag of letters that you send to studio@photographydaily.show as we walk. So, what's in the mailbag? Well, I'll tell you in a moment, as you know, after I show my sincere thanks to mpb.com for sponsoring this time that we spend together walking. They are the #1 company in the UK, the US and Europe when it comes to buying, selling and trading used camera kit online. And they're a company I use personally. My recent X100V comes from MPB and I'm using it most weeks. And as you know, I'm very happy with it, having something that fits in a pocket to take with me wherever, but still packs a wonderful punch with stuff I can frame large if I wish. Now that is the way to move with a camera, so thank you MPB. Plus, buying used means that how I am purchasing means that I'm part of the circular economy, and so being part of that and sustainability is really important to me personally. Over the last couple of months, their product specialists have been answering the questions you send in about kit, stuff you want to sell, stuff you want to buy. And today comes from Bethany Patterson, who writes, I want to start recording video alongside my photos. I have a Canon 5D2 and the files that it produces are too large. I'd like something with a better codec that makes life easy when editing. From MPB, as the Canon 5D2 is one of the first DSLRs to include full HD video, its settings and modes are limited. The MOV file format, or MOV if you like, that the camera uses gives an excellent detailed output, but sadly, as you've experienced, Bethany, very large files. It wasn't until the 5D4 that the smaller file format of MPEG-4 AVC was added. Now, I'm going to add my own twopenny worth in here, that as you start to look at the cameras quite a way past the 5D2, and as well as my Canon experience, I know that the Fujifilm system works very well. Cameras like the X-T3, fantastic bargain right now, with a fabulous codec for video, with the benefit of being able to hold the eyepiece to your eye. Now, because it's not a DSLR, because it's mirrorless, you're going to enjoy another point of contact when you hold that eyepiece to your eye, so that you get a steadier shot. It's not full frame, but it's wonderful in low light as a video camera. And in that it's not the latest out of the XT stable, you'll get a strong deal. Though I'm aware you're going to be thinking lenses as well. Right, I don't want to be a product specialist. They're far better at doing that than I, but I wanted to add something in there. Anyway, send your questions to our email address, studio@photographydaily.show. Sell the kit you're not using. Trade it in for the kit you need to create. Buy used, spend less, and get more at mpb.com. Our patrons also keep these boots walking. We'll hear from them later on. Today, this is what we're going to be talking about together as we walk, or bimble, as someone who's already getting far too many mentions today will say. We talk about getting your camera on minimalist camping adventures. We're talking bivvy here. You, your camera, a sleeping bag, and the stars. We're thinking life, universe, and everything with a contributor in Australia. What happens when you think, I'm out of creative mojo? Why does everything we photograph have to be so amazing? Or does it? That is the question. Moose encounters of the third kind. Well, actually, it's got nothing to do with numbers, but I was a big fan of the movie that started with the word close. And also we talk about a very, very special Australian photographer who I've only recently become aware of, but sadly a little too late to talk with. But I know from the letter we have and some words I've found that you'll be all the richer for knowing about this superhuman and super photographer. Shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on and laced. Check. Walking trousers or shorts, long socks for those walking amongst the nasty stuff. Check. Spare batteries. Check. Fillmore cards. Check. Earbuds in. Check. Lens caps off. Let's walk. There's the light sound of light engineering in the background today. I'm not quite sure where it is. It's not very welcome amongst all the beautiful bird song that you can also hear. I started my walk quite early this morning. When I looked out the window, I saw wonderful mist and I thought, fantastic, that's what I want, a misty morning. Then, boosh, by the time I'd made a cup of tea, or my flask of tea rather, and shoved a quick bit of toast in me mouth, it had gone, dissipated, zipped off. I will one day fog, you will be mine. Thank you, as always, for the letters that you send in, for your comments on the website show pages, our Instagram, and your picture stories in the Facebook group. I feel proud that you feel you're in a safe place to share some of the words that you do. So sincerely, thank you. And if you'd like to send in some of those thoughts, your pictures, of course, for the show page, then do send them in via the website address, which is studio@photographydaily.show. Studio@photographydaily.show. Serenaded in the background as well by sirens. Honestly, I think moving to Tucson, now I can pronounce it properly, even though it has the rattlesnakes and the jumping choya and various other fanged insects, birds and creatures, it's seeming sometimes quite a nice thought to live there with the peace, the quiet, the solitude on those photo walks. 2,000 pixels on the long side is what I say for those photographs. Now, 2,000 pixels on the long side has been confusing a few folk. So either send them in full size and I can resize them for you, bearing in mind your email provider may stop sending you Christmas cards if you go over the preferred limit. Or from today, it's not really show news, but sort of, from today and until further notice, he says, sounding like somebody from the Council for Parking Enforcement, I'm making sure that even the portrait pictures are 2,000 pixels wide. So from this moment on, cue the song. I'm going to say that send them in 2,000 pixels wide. Just think wide. Whether it's portrait, landscape, square, don't confuse it with circle. Make them 2,000 pixels wide, please, good people of PD World. If you have pictures in the system waiting to be aired that are not, do not panic and think, I need to send in those pictures again, 2,000 pixels wide. You do not. I'll do some magic. They'll be fine. But for those who've arrived here, not really as photographers who are thinking, what does he mean, 2,000 pixels wide? Already he's talking about zooms. I was told this was non-technical. I could come along for a walk. You can. If you like to send your pictures into the show from the walks that you make and you're using a smartphone and you don't really give two what's-its-names for what pixels are, just send them best quality you can to the email address and I will do the rest. Yes, enough of this technical talk. I do feel the nosebleed coming on. Let's dive into the first letter of the mailbag. Oh, before we do, Neil, come on, get to that mailbag. Before we do, thank you, John Baisley, who sent me the podcast global ratings. Turns out we are in the top 1.5% of podcasts, which I'm really rather proud of for what's quite a niche thing. So thank you, John. I've no idea how these ratings on the service listen notes are calculated, but it was, let's just say it was encouraging and gave me a warm glow. Not because I live next door to the Aldermaston nuclear weapons establishment, or for those in the UK. Do you remember the glowing advert? I'm digressing now. I promise I'll get to this letter. Do you remember if you lived in the UK in your childhood of the, I suppose, 70s, early 80s possibly, do you remember the Ready Brek advert? Which was we started talking about gruel last week, didn't we? We're talking about porridge again, which was I think quite a sweet porridge, wasn't it? And it showed kids on their way to school with a glow around them, as if they were protected. Or maybe they live next door to the Aldermaston weapons establishment as well. Right, mail time. Letters drawn. First one from Stefan Henning, with pictures that will of course be on the show page. Hi Neil, Stefan from Hildesheim in Germany here. 2022 for me started discovering your podcast. You see, Stefan, we would be only in the top 50% if you weren't here. It's all down to you. Your interview style is fantastic. Now stop it, Stefan. The warm glow of embarrassment is surfacing now. Nothing to do with the Aldermaston weaponsy place. And your soothing and engaging voice really does it. Is it ASMR, AMSR? I always get these letters the wrong way around. AMSR channel to be announced soon, Stefan. Thanks to you, I developed the habit of walking instead of biking to and from work, so that I have a little bit more time with a podcast. Camera at hand, that is. Being a Fujifilm user, like you, makes me feel even more connected. Well, that's an ironic mail to start with, because I do have the X100V in the bag today, but I am staying with the zoom lens, and there's a reason for that, because I'm meeting somebody later on during this walk that you won't hear today. I don't think you will. You're very likely to hear him within the More Show or in the coming weeks. Anyway, he says, I'd like to share some photos from a recent bike trip. Now, there's a story attached to this. It was a Friday night. I packed my trusty steel horse. I like the description of your bike, your trusty steel horse. Loaded up my camera bag, sleeping bag, warm clothes, some tea, and your Redheads or Gingers podcast, and headed off to the Brocken, which is the highest peak here in northern Germany, 1,142 meters, that is. Well, that certainly beats the highest peak that I've been walking up around these parts at 261 meters. I make an incredible fuss about that, Stefan. 1,142. That's practically climbing Everest for me. He says, I plan to sleep in the forest shelter overnight and ride up to the peak at sunrise. Ever since reading, now this is a book I wasn't aware of, and you might want to look it up. It's called The Book of the Bivvy by somebody called Ronald Turnbull. He says, I firmly believe that all British people, Scottish at least, do such things in their leisure time. If you're thinking, well, who's Ronald Turnbull, Neil? I'll tell you. He's a chap that essentially takes his bivvy, or takes not much, and goes to sleep wild, and does these adventures and writes books about them, and takes some pictures along the way. Now, I wrote to him immediately after this email that you sent me, Stefan. I wrote to him and asked him to come onto the show, and he showed extreme surprise and said, you do know I'm not a photographer. And I said, yeah, it doesn't matter, but I'm hoping he may come on and talk to us, because I think his adventures really do play into this spirit that we have, well, as adventurers ourselves. Anyway, so stop press on that one, and we'll see whether he does or not. But it is, I suppose you could say, the pinnacle of minimalist wild camping, the Book of the Bivvy. A very, 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 very small tent, literally a fold of material over you. Sometimes it's called bivvy bagging. Turnbull, he says, mentions an obligatory stopover in a pub for dinner, which is what I did as well, says Stefan. After a refreshing, I'm hoping I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Altener Dunkel. I believe a pint of stout, as you would call it. The real climbing uphill started. I didn't expect there to be so much snow left, but fortunately I packed enough clothes and had some wide tyres on the bike. And you'll see those, I think, in the show page pictures today. Oh, train going past. I didn't realise I was near I sort of stepped into... Oh, there it is. Oh yeah, Neil, I can see it. Stepped into woodland, had no idea I was near a train track. I found my shelter, he says. I set up camp, slept until... See, this would be typical. I would have put my bivvy here, because this is quite nice. You can hear the birds, they're serenading me in the morning, but I've stuck myself right next to a train track. Can you imagine that? The first one in the morning, 3:30, the milk train comes through. Boom. Wake up time. I found my shelter, he says, set up camp, slept until 4:30 and set off to the peak. The reward was an awesome... Now, careful, I'm not sure you're aware of my feelings about the word awesome. You may be, because you put a trademark next to it. So, sunrise and pictures, which are on the show page. A cup of tea later. It's not very German, is it? I thought that you were all into coffee in Germany. I thought you were expert baristas. Anyway, tea. I think tea is overtaking coffee, isn't it? In some parts of the world, anyway. It was all slippery, icy downhill to the next train station to get me back home before the family woke up. What a blast! Sorry, I don't have a website to link to. Until now, he says, I felt kind of awkward doing so, mainly because I see so many great pictures online that I'm slipping toward your before-mentioned imposter syndrome. Gladly, I don't seem to be alone with this, so I'll reconsider building a website. Kind regards, Stefan Henning. Stefan, thank you very much for sending us some thoughts about your adventure. Those pictures, as I said, will be on the show page, but I want you to go and look at a site. Here's some homework for you, Stefan. A site that we've talked about before, and I'm not sure if we've talked about it this side of Christmas, but it's called thedailynice.com. So if you just started listening, you might not be aware of it. It's a website with pictures, or probably more appropriately, picture per day by Jason Evans. It is literally one picture. Sorry, the surprise there. Something fell on my head. I thought, no, am I standing underneath a pigeon? No. It's one picture per day, always new. It rotates. You can't look at old ones. In the site's words, the Daily Nice, says Jason, is about my enthusiasm for looking and being. Every day I show a photograph of something that makes me happy. And it's little more than that, really. And do you know, in terms of quality, some of the pictures, and my apologies to Jason, I have asked him to come on a couple of times now. I've never received a reply from him, so I'm assuming he won't hear this. But some of the pictures are really very, very, very ordinary, but they make Jason happy, and that is what counts, isn't it? And he has a website championing it. So no need for imposter syndrome. Just show what makes you happy, what floats your boat, Stefan. And this is my favourite phrase ever. And just post every whenever. I'm not sure where I heard that, but I claimed it as mine long ago. In the meantime, you can see Stefan's work on the show page today. Now, in the absence of having words, audio words, that is, from our new friend Stefan Henning, I'm going to play you some words from a photographer who I'm sure I have talked about. I mean, here we are, what are we, in April? I have talked about since Christmas, most definitely, probably too many times. My good friend Mally Davis, who has a fantastic YouTube channel, which I will link to. He has his own podcast as well, and the images on his website are glorious. They really are, and I take a lot of inspiration and happy times actually in front of a computer looking through Mally's website. What I love about Mally, there's many things I love about Mally, but what I particularly love about Mally is his utter enthusiasm he is down to earth when he's making his photo walks, which he does on video. And when he finds stuff like his famous mallee's tree or other things along the path, you can just hear his sheer joy being with a camera.
Back out, back on the fells. Today is just a day of looking. Again, I just want to visit a few places, and we're going to head up a wee little fell and investigate trees. There's going to be a couple of trees. Sunrise is 15 minutes away. It's very, very moody, extremely stormy, which wasn't forecast. And I've just looked over where you are, and there's a slither of the most piercing pink. So what you're looking at here is sunrise. Do you know there's a slight chance that it could get up underneath that cloud? It's a heavy base of cloud. It's quite beautiful to witness this, actually. You know, I don't think that is something I do enough of. Just chill and just watch it happen. Instead of racing, trying to get a photo, I'm just going to witness this.
Mallee Davis. Neil, you and Mallee, you two should move in together. Give over, as Mallee would probably say. I've been away for a few days in the Lake District with family, and really this walk I had scheduled, planned. Sounds very formal. I had intended to make a photo walk in the lakes, but actually in the end I ended up spending time with family, which I've done, I think, precious little of late. It's been a reasonably, I don't want to say the word busy, because you know what I feel about the word busy. You know, when people say busy, it's almost, you know, oh, I'm busy, I'm more important than you. And it's not supposed to sound like that at all, but it's been rather, I can't think of another word at the moment. I haven't got a thesaurus. Wish I was pushing along with thesaurus. I think of a far better word. In that times have been fairly busy. It was wonderful to spend time with family, and we spent a lot of time actually, because my eldest is away skiing, although he returns tomorrow, and my youngest, as you know, he loves trains. So we went on a bit of a train adventure, and I'm going to talk about that in the More episode tomorrow over on the Patreon channel. But while we were away, we had this competition, and we all failed dismally, Mallee. So we're not even daring to send you the pictures. We said we're going to enter our own competition to find Mallee's tree. Mallee has this tree, and it's the tree. Always, it has to be, when you take a pic, Mallee's tree pictures. Well, they have to be very uncomplicated. Often the tree, I think Mallee sets them. They're trees that rise up high on a hill, and he sets them against a background which doesn't complicate the picture at all. You can see the tree really very clearly. It is Mallee's tree. I think a couple of weeks ago, didn't I? Maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was trying to find my Mallee's tree, and no, none of us found our Mallee's tree. It's like the holy grail of trees to find a Mallee's tree. It's what it's become known in our household. Have you got a Mallee's tree shot? No, not that one. Sometimes when we're driving along, Sam will look out the window. She says, "There's a Mallee's tree." See, even my wife is doing it. I say, I can't stop here. We're on a motorway. Not sure what the traffic officer would say. Why have you stopped here? Well, I've seen Mallee's tree. He might say, "Oh, do you mean Mallee Davis?" "Yeah, Mallee Davis." "Oh, that's all right. You crack on, sir." In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be releasing news of the next Photo Walk retreat, which this time is going to be in Scotland, very, very close to Inverness. Patrons expect a notice soon. Oh, you're very loud. Wonderful. Following me along. Yes, patrons expect a notice soon, and then we'll open up our places as we did before. September, it's right at the start of September 2022, Inverness. More news to come soon. Write a letter from Kevin Pritchard in Australia land. Hi Neil, I was out tonight taking Jack. Yes, Jack the Jack Russell. I like your inventiveness. For a walk around our local lake, and it gave me a chance to listen to the second half of episode 282. I listened to the first half when I went for a more rigorous walk earlier during the day, and I thought I'd drop you a quick letter with some thoughts. Should I make it a list? Oh no, that sounds like a complaint. Morning. Hello. I wasn't saying morning to you. That was to the lady with the dog. A wonderful looking whippet. Huge. Is that a whippet? It's a whippet dinosaur. Anyway, should I make a list? That sounds like a complaint, doesn't it? Strap yourselves in. Firstly, he says, I need to add to the comments commending you on the wonderful sound you get. Oh, stop. Both you and Stefan. It really is incredible. It makes the podcast easy to listen to. It's a talent you need to be quite proud of. I feel a butt coming on. Don't you? It's got all the makings of a butt, this sentence. Don't touch the butt. Finding Nemo moment there. Which leads me, he says, to number 2. Is this the complaint moment? Listening to John Carmichael telling his story was delightful. It was like a suspenseful movie where you know the hero is going to survive, but are on edge regardless. Just incredible how he made it all happen, and he deserves all the accolades he gets, as it's a great story and it's a great image. Oh, hang on. Stand down complaints department. I think we're going to be okay. Yes, you're absolutely right about John Carmichael. And if you're wondering what the devil we're talking about here, John made this incredible. This is a moment where I could use the word awesome. Picture of a total eclipse. And it really was a superb image. And I see a path down here that looks very, very muddy but extremely inviting. I've almost got Carl's words in my ears. Don't you dare. I can hear it. Getting into the car with muddy shoes on. Not brought my spares today. Yes, he made this incredible picture. Well, actually, it's from a series of pictures out of an aircraft, a commercial aircraft window, of a total lunar eclipse and the moon's shadow. And I'll link to that episode because it was quite the adventure, really. He says, making it sound like a famous 5 adventure, where everything was conspiring against John to make this picture. I'll do it no justice because he tells it over the course of 20-25 minutes in 2 parts on the programme. And I like to think it was a grip the edge of your seat story. And number 3, he says, I've attached a couple of images. The first one was made as I was listening to the play-out music at the end of the show, and I thought it was just perfect. Again, I'll put these on the show page so it'll make sense as we tell the stories. It made me stop and I looked up towards the sky, yes. Look up, look down. Very, very pertinent this week with what was set, of course, on Monday, but as our assignment. But your sky picture, yes, lots of contrast, wonderful. In front of me, great light, great clouds, the moon sitting really quite small, and it did make me think about life and the universe and everything, and I had to grab a quick pic on my old phone, which is perfectly okay. I was using the phone a lot, actually, in the Lake District. The Lake District, Neil? Surrounded by all that beauty and you're using a phone? Yes. Even my son, my youngest, Thomas, has started using the phrase, the best camera, Dad, is the one you have in your hand at the time. I know, son. Don't be too clever now. Don't be too smart. So life, the universe and everything was your pick. We could title it that, couldn't we? Isn't that what the book contemplates in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I'm sure there are much better images of the moon and the sky than this one, but at the moment, at that time, it was wonderful. And yes, that's what just having any camera with you that can make an image that you remember that moment by, that's why it's so important and precious. And more importantly, if I wasn't out listening to Photography Daily, he said I wouldn't have had the moment. So there we go. We do have a purpose, after all. The other image is just a grab shot I made as I was heading to the lake. To be honest, it startled the you-know-what out of me when I saw it. Sitting in its web, about 10 feet in the air. Right, if that's a picture of the spider 10 feet in the air above you, that must have been humongously large. Huge spider. Totally harmless, he says, unless you upset it. It looks, you are writing from Australia land, so it looks exactly like the one that we found at a tourist attraction, which was frightening the you-know-whats out of everybody that passed it, especially when it just twitched a bit, moved. I mean, that was as big as a dustbin lid, as big as a huge satellite dish it was. And I know you didn't know this when you sent these pictures in, these two fantastic pictures, which will be on the show page. But, of course, they play really well into this week's assignment with Valerie Jardin. So it was almost like you knew what was coming, wasn't it? Anyway, you did say to write you a letter, he says Kevin, so I thought I'd give it a go. Thanks for the podcast. It's been fantastic to listen to over the last couple of years. I'd say that you probably don't know how many people you and PD, who's PD? This PD, is he following us? Have had a real positive impact on, so thank you very much. Regards, Kevin Pritchard. Kevin, thank you very much. P.S. he says, I'm from North Lakes, which is just to the north of Brisbane in Australia land. P.P.S. I did hear you talk about the merch. That's not why I sent the letter in, but if you do think my letter's worthy, please donate it to somebody really deserving, possibly someone on the street or on hard times. Someone where a couple of hot chocolate will make a real difference. That's not a bad idea, you know. These flasks, the Photography Daily, the coveted Photography Daily flask. Yeah, that would be the sort of thing. Top it up with warm drinks every now and then. Thank you for that. There's another one. PPPS. Don't you just love how in letters you can go back and edit? So why use a PS? Well, you can, yes, I suppose so. But we're thinking in analog style, aren't we, with our letters from email? So you have to attach PPPPPSs. I think audio-wise, you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to play some inspiration from the episode that you mentioned a moment ago, featuring the photographer John Carmichael and that search he was making. And I'll leave a link so you can listen to the rest of the whole adventure if you like. But that search he was making photographically to make the perfect picture out of an aircraft window, of all places, to make what has become this award-winning total solar eclipse picture.
We climb up, we go to 35,000 feet, and we're about 5 or 10 minutes from totality, and the moon is getting closer and closer in. The sun is now looking like it's a crescent moon, and, everybody's kind of getting excited. The sky is getting a little bit darker. It was very cool. All of a sudden, the pilot, his name's Jeffrey Jackson, by the way, Captain Jackson, he says, he comes on to the PA system. He's like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about 5 minutes away from totality. I'm going to do what's called an S-turn maneuver. And I'm like, he's going to do it.
He's going to do it.
Oh my God, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to give you all a heads up, to show you ahead of time, what to expect. And I'm going to do the same thing once we're in totality. So he banks the plane to the left and to the right. And I'm sweating and shaking, and I have 3 cameras here, and I'm just trying to get all my settings right. I'm doing 7 to 9 bracketed exposures for each image. I spent a lot of money on the fastest memory cards possible, and my goal was just to get all the data in, right? So I'm trying to get all these practice shots in, and I immediately realize he's not turning the plane wide enough. I'm not getting enough of the earth in. And also the eclipse is too high up, and it's getting warped from all the layers of plastic in the airplane window. I have to shoot straight out the window. I can't angle it, otherwise it gets all messed up. Obviously, it's out of my hands now. There's nothing I can do, right? So all of a sudden, the flight attendants, there's 2 flight attendants sitting right in front of me in the jump seat, facing me, because I'm in the front row. They get a call from the captain, and she says, John, the captain wants to know, how was that turn? I was like, are you kidding me? This literally is my own private chartered jet now. I said, well, since he's asking, it wasn't good enough. He said it's not good enough. He needs a steep return and blah, blah, blah. And so he gets on the fly, pun intended, he gets approval by the FAA, and he climbs up another 4,000 feet to 39,000 feet. And he ends up turning the plane around 5 different times while the moon's shadow is passing over us.
John Carmichael, with his amazing, just a short part, a soupçon. Soupçon? Is it soupçon? Neil, you have enough trouble with English. Don't start speaking gobbledygook to us. Yeah, probably right. Yes, I'll link to the full episode with John on the show page today. Now, why am I today carrying my heavier camera? Usually I like to travel light, as you know, on these photo walks, but I'm carrying, well, it's not that much heavier. It's the Canon R6, which I use for most of my commercial work these days, and a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. The beast. Well, it's not really the beast. The beast is the huge 2.8 one, and I have the f4. I was going to say variant, but there's a word I feel very uncomfortable about these days. And it's on an adapter, thanks to the word that I don't like to mention these days. Of course, it's not been the best 2 years of business, so I've got my mirrorless Canon, but I'm using an adapter with my older Canon glass, which seemed. Another train. There we go. Again, I can't see it. Where are these trains today? I don't know. They're hiding in the bushes. Yes, so where were we? I've completely forgotten where we were now. Talking about John Carmichael eating soup and other such nonsense. Oh yes, that's where we were. Yes, carrying the larger kit than usual on these photo walks. The reason is I'm meeting a chap called Matt, who I met a couple of weeks ago. Did I mention him? I might have done. Definitely did in the Patreon, I'm sure, in the More episode. But this chap called Matt, who shared, I think, quite a personal story with me about why he photographs. I was walking. Actually, it wasn't a photo walk episode. It was I was walking with my little pal Sabark a lot, and we came across Matt, and he was making photographs of a bird, and we came veering round the corner. As usual, I was talking to Sabark a lot, having a chat with him, and he was doing his usual, taking no notice of me and eating and sniffing whatever he could find. And then poor Matt just round the corner trying to make a picture of a bird that he'd probably spent so long sort of patiently waiting for. And then I come veering round the corner, chatting away, frightening all the bird life away. So after I'd made my apologies, we had a chat, and it turned out that Matt had quite the story about why he goes every morning to this particular place to make photographs. So that's who I'm meeting up with, and I thought I'd better bring something that was a bit more suitable for making pictures of bird life with, if we're going to make some pictures together. So I think he has a 300 millimeter lens, perhaps longer, I can't remember now. So I may not be able to capture quite what he does, but I'll give it a go. I'll give it my best shot. It reminds me actually of when I went on, I think I've told this story, on safari with my wife on our honeymoon, and I'd only brought a small Canon Ixus with me, and in the van we were travelling in, there was a couple that they had all the gear. I'm not saying no idea, they may have had plenty of idea, all the gear, plenty of idea, but they did find it rather amusing when they said, what was her name and his name? Della was her name. Della, because I kept calling her Delaware, thinking that I was being amusing. Della and, we'll just call him Pete. Della and Pete. Pete found it very amusing when he said, what do you do for a living then? I said, I'm a photographer. And I had this tiny Ixus trying to capture pictures of the wildlife that had come down to the waterhole of the evening. Really? He looked at me, not quite believing. So yes, I thought I'd be better equipped for the task today. Thank you for the wonderful 365s you're sending in on the Community 365 page. As ever, your observations of life and where you live are fabulous to see. You can join in by simply sending me an image 2,000 pixels wide, and send them to studio@photographydaily.show. studio@photographydaily.show. If you can send me a little bit about perhaps why you made the picture, or where it is, a small detail about it. Certainly doesn't need to be an essay. That would be fantastic. And the whole point of it was, of course, to be able to join in with a 365 without thinking that you have to do it every single day and the stress that comes with making 365 pictures every day. Those of you that do a 365, and you've been doing it since, well, if we go by the Gregorian calendar, January the 1st is when most people start, then you'll know what a challenge that is. So yeah, my hat is firmly tipped to you for doing that. But that's what the Community 365 is all about on our website. Everybody gets a chance to join in. We take one picture per day, and I join in as well now and then. But I'd like to give Craig Wilson's picture from Tuesday, which is number 223, a mention. It's a reasonably stylized picture of a lighthouse and what looks like the last knockings of a wonderful sunset. Super composition, leading my eyes along a jetty, or it could be a pierhead, couldn't it, toward this lighthouse with a solitary figure on it, which is always really a good thing for scale, isn't it, in a photograph? Putting people in pictures, or something that you recognise the size of, gives an image scale, and that's quite a good trick when you want to show particularly the majesty of something, that's for sure. But I also want to read your words, because I think they're really precious, Craig, and very important, particularly for anybody who's found themselves in the same sort of position. This photo, writes Craig, was a turning point for me to keep taking photographs. I thought I'd share it with you after listening to you mention burnout on the show. I had a few months where the photos I was taking just left me feeling really uninspired, so I stopped forcing it and I took a step back. When I eventually returned, I took this photo, and since then stopped really putting pressure on myself to make an image every time I go out. It can suck the fun right out of photography. So we said, as a sort of a postscript on that piece, even for amateurs, and that's not, I never feel that's very relevant really. If you're making pictures, you're making pictures. I think, amateur, pro, whatever so-called level or status, if you will, I think that's relevant across the board, that you can feel that burnout, that you can feel sometimes yourself sort of pushing for creativity, and it just doesn't come to you when you're trying too hard. So thank you for sharing that. It's a picture I really hope you go and look at on the Community 365 tab that's on the website. Right, let me introduce for the first time today my guest, Laura El Tentawi. We kind of talk of her life stories. We gently make our way through our conversation, but I will add this. She is one of those photographers who, she speaks to me on all sorts of levels. She's a writer, a thinker when you read her words, for sure. She's learned to piece her still images together so well in these potent, powerful short films, which I adore. I say adore, actually. The subject matter's not always subject to be adored, but the way that she pieces her work together, it's incredibly powerful. Poignancy comes through so well within her picture making, and in particular her private projects. And they're obviously very pivotal to her, and often they build out, I think, from her life as a commercial photographer. She seems always to be looking at if you'll excuse the cliche, looking at the wider, or looking for the wider picture. If she is somewhere, there is always someone or something that or who fascinates her, and I think there's a lesson in that for all of us, particularly for me. The places that I travel to, which I see things and I think, that would make a great project, and then I procrastinate about it. So I think there is a lesson. Actually, the project is something we talk about every single week, isn't it? The potency of it. And that will emerge later too in a letter from an Australian photographer today. But for now, let me introduce you to Laura El Tentawi. Laura, if travel provides the rich texture of our experiences, you had a strong early start, didn't you, really? From Ronkswood in Worcestershire, which I did have to look up. I live in the UK. I know where Worcestershire is. I had no idea where Ronkswood was. To Egypt, to Saudi Arabia, to the States. Where's home now for you, though?
I don't really know. I think I've gone through phases where I know and then other stages where I don't. I've gone through a whole phase where I was really trying to redefine what home really means. Yeah. Because, again, there's this traditional interpretation that home has to be a place, and usually the place where you come from or where you're rooted from. But for someone like me, that's really that does have a foot in two sort of contrasting worlds, this has always been a big question mark for me. Yeah. I think I've reached a place where I just feel like home is something I carry with me. So I don't really have this sort of anxiety and tension that I used to carry within me. So I've been able to do that. And actually, photography has been a great way for me to navigate that. And in making pictures and in really meditating on it, I think I managed to find some answers.
I read in the Worcester News when I tried to get a fix, by the way, on Ronkswood, that there's the famous Punch Bowl pub, which is the centre of the town, which when the church was demolished, it became the church.
Well, you've dug up more than I managed to dig up. I went to Ronkswood, I think it was 7 years ago now.
Right, yeah.
And I was basically trying to retrace my parents' footsteps. These childhood memories, the pictures that I've always seen in the family album of them there, and obviously me missing because I wasn't born yet. So I tried to go back and sort of insert myself in those memories without them being there, because I went by myself. And it was really surreal and difficult, actually, obviously emotional. And again, home is an emotional thing as well. But yeah, I mean, Worcestershire is a place that I know I was born there, but I don't really have any particular relationship with.
I find a great melancholy going back to places where you grew up. I remember actually I wanted to retrace my steps to the very first house I lived in. And I remember writing to the person who lived in that house and receiving a letter back from them saying, do you know what? I don't think you should ever come back to this house. I think you should move on. They made the decision for me. But when I went to revisit my old primary school, I sensed that they were probably correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because obviously nothing ever really stays the same. No. Things are constantly changing. Yeah. This word gentrification is something we've become really well aware of. So when I went, Worcestershire at Ronkswood was gentrified. The hospital where I was born was no longer there. Yes. It's moved to the edge of the city. That's right, yeah. Now there's these really new, beautiful, sort of trendy homes that are there. So everything that I was kind of looking for, all these memories I was trying to hold on to, were not there anymore. So I was hugely disappointed. And even the images I made when I was there, they were failed Polaroids because the film I had was expired. So I couldn't even hold on to the vision I created. And I haven't ventured back since, to be honest.
We're making quite the leap, but your first photography experience was on a news desk in America. I think you spent around best part of a decade in America, didn't you? But not all that time working for a newspaper.
Yeah, indeed. So I went to America. I remember everything about it. I went in 1998 and I was there up until about 2002 or 3. But yeah, I went there to do my education and I still didn't really know what I wanted to be. Photography was nowhere near anything I could have even been thinking about at the time. In fact, I never really appreciated photography just because of the way my dad used to pose us on holidays and stuff. I always had this really frustrated relationship with photography. Yeah. So yeah, America was the beginning. It's where I really began to find myself as an individual because I come from a very strong sort of family structure. You don't really leave your house when you're 18. That's a very Western concept. You leave your house when you're married. So I basically left my house when I was 18 and started my life and really found myself. And obviously photography was very much part of that.
I read that your parents didn't necessarily understand the photographic route. I sense they probably have now with all the awards, the ambassadorialship, the stories that you've worked on, the incredible films that you've made, which we'll come to. So I don't want to leap too far forward, but tell me they understand that whole thing now.
They do, but it's taken a really, really long time. I think the there were so many things to understand, really. I mean, the thing is, my mom's an artist, my dad's an anesthesiologist. Yes. So my dad is just a very practical person. He wants to put food on the table, and he never really quite understood this idea of doing something out of passion and struggling with it, and not really necessarily having money and working on freelance is something he does not understand. That freelance for him is like unemployed. So do you have a job? So I went through all that. I think mostly it was really trying to explain it to my dad. And it took so long, so many years. But I think it was really stubbornness. I think part of it was also growing up as a woman in a culture that is typically male dominated, really, and really having to fight through that and saying, I'm going to do it my way and nothing is really going to stop me. That was a very big part of it. And that's really defined who I am now in many ways.
Do you think the newspapers are responsible for providing you with this incredible tenacious spirit that you seem to have in your photography?
Absolutely. I mean, again, newspapers were an incredible beginning for me because they gave me the opportunity to go out and make images in situations where nothing was necessarily photographable. The light was bad, the composition, everything was bad. You were in a room with neon lights where everything was looking green on your camera. Yeah. So for me, from my perspective, it really defined me, and it gave me this creative flexibility that, there's no excuse for not making a photograph because every situation can be photographable. It's really on you, on seeing that. So this idea of having the eye or the photographic eye, I think it's definitely something that you either have or don't have, but I think it's also something you have to nurture, and you really have to push yourself to it. And I think newspapers definitely gave me that. It also gave me the sense of community, being part of a community and going out on a daily basis and making images about it. And as someone that was in a culture that's not my own, that was something that I was really craving.
Your picture making has certainly changed, conceptually, spiritually, in every single way. How do you begin to find a photographic voice when it changes that considerably?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it really was a journey for me to really understand what it is that I have to offer the world as a photographer. Yeah. Everybody's a photographer now, obviously. So what can Laura offer that is particular, but can also really bring people to the images that can really resonate with people? And I've really found there's no simple answer to it, but I really found that the photographic image is very much an image that grows with me as a person. So my narrative, as I've grown, as I've gained confidence, as I've been insecure about certain things, all these things in my life that I was going through were really pathways for me to create images, and the images kind of go side by side with that. So that's why my images have shifted in a way, why the things I'm interested in have shifted, and they will continue to shift and evolve. And I definitely believe that if you make an image from a place of authenticity and honesty, that people really feel that and they come to it and it resonates with them. And I think also changing the language around which I articulate photography. So instead of saying that I'm showing an image, I'm actually sharing an image. Yeah. The idea of sharing instead of just showing something. I think showing has a lot of, it's almost pretentious in a way, because it's like, I've taken this, now I'm showing you to it. Here's what it is. But if you're sharing something, I think it opens the idea that we can have a conversation about it, and that it's also yours in a way, and you can bring your own interpretation to it. So I'm always trying to really see how I can continue to be excited about this medium as well, and open up that space for me to continue to create.
We're going to make another leap now. Ronkswood to America, to Cairo. And Cairo happened when you turned freelance with the camera, didn't it? Why the move?
I basically moved to Cairo in 2005. One was a main personal reason, because my maternal grandmother unexpectedly passed away. And I just felt like this is a moment where I really need to be back with my family. And then the other reason was I felt like, Cairo is my city. This is, Egypt is my country. I feel like this is where I really need to be. Yeah. To begin to take pictures and basically see if this is what I can be. Can I be a photographer? Can I actually do this? And at that point, really my interest was in selling images and editorial photography in magazines and stuff like that. Of course, that that shifted. But that was really the main reason.
In the Shadow of the Pyramids is a very important body of work for you, and that's what we're talking about really with that Cairo move. And I know your work isn't in any sense about what I'm about to talk about, but I feel blessed to have made some pictures in the pyramids, which I know sounds such a touristy thing to say, but I don't think you're ever prepared for the spectacle of being inside or actually around these incredible places, and that includes Cairo sitting next door. It's such a vibrant place. It's noisy. It feels, in some respects, I felt anyway, a bit threatened by it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cairo is it's definitely a very intense city.
Yeah.
It's a city that people either love or hate. And I think it's a city that even for Egyptians, we also love it and hate it sometimes. So it's like a roller coaster. You're constantly falling in love with it and then you're not. Yeah. And you have your moments. You kind of know, the moments. I'm always in love with Cairo at night. Anytime at night in Cairo, I'm absolutely in love with that city. The energy, the kind of the music that you hear in the air, the people blasting. Yeah. The music, but daytime Cairo, I'm not always in love with it. Yeah, it has an energy, and it's definitely a city that pushes you to your limits. And a lot of times that is a very good space to create art and create something creative, whether it's music or paintings or graffiti, or in my case, photography. So it's a city that, is endlessly inspiring you to create. Yeah. And in that sense, it's a fantastic city. And that's why a lot of people gravitate there to go and make images or to create art or just be inspired by it.
It's definitely a city of extremes, that's for sure. But tell me about the project In the Shadow of the Pyramids and how it changed, because inevitably it changed as you went along.
Yeah, well, like all the works I've done, it's definitely a journey. And it was very confrontational because, people were always asking me, where are you from? Because you walk out with a camera and immediately people think you're a tourist. So I always had to justify my Egyptianness in Cairo, in my own city, like a few streets away from where I actually lived. So that was always difficult. But basically what I really wanted to do in the beginning, there was no story that I was trying to tell. I was just trying to discover my city again and really trying to peel back the layers on how I've changed as a person and how that is manifesting through the images I'm making. So I would just go to neighborhoods and talk to people, or neighborhoods that I've never been really, and make images there and just walk around and talk to people. So it was really a journey of discovery, self-discovery for sure, but also discovery of my own city. And then, of course, fast forward, 10 years down the road, and the revolution happened.
The history changed, didn't it? We had Tahrir Square, and then your photography really changes within the project, doesn't it?
Yeah, in the beginning, there was no responsibility. I just wanted to make the images, tell them, from my own perspective. But then when the revolution happened, there was a sense of urgency, and I really felt a sense of responsibility at that moment that, I've really taken on this. Now I really need to continue. So it was, I think the Egypt journey was in many ways the very first body of work that I did and actually finished. Whereas before I was beginning things and not necessarily following through with them. So I was really defining at that point. I managed to begin something and end it. And that's great because it says a lot. It's about maturity, personal maturity, but also artistic maturity. Yeah. And it's also about closure, which, the journey in Egypt, the visual journey for me became about really finding closure. And it was when this idea of home was something I was really beginning to interrogate for myself. I don't feel fully Egyptian because what does that even mean, being fully Egyptian? All these questions about, am I fully Egyptian? I've left the country. I've lived far away. I'm also embraced ideas from other places. I'm coming back a completely different person. So all this chaos was happening within me, and there was also chaos in the country itself. So I found myself actually within that chaos, and I just created images around it.
And in that chaos, there's definitely a photojournalistic feel to your pictures. It changes so much. I know that you felt personally that you had to be a little bit cautious too. You were hiding your camera, for example, as you left the square each evening.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. For me, what I remember is the euphoria of all the moments that were there, the sense of unity. Yeah. That we had. You could just really talk to anybody on the street and you'd find so much in common. And in many, for the years before, I had felt sort of this egotistical sense of, I've come back a changed person and this country is kind of not the same. And it was so egotistical when I realized that in Tahrir Square, because people who had never left the country were also looking for a sense of identity, and they were looking for themselves as well. So it had nothing to do with me leaving and coming back, and that sense of maybe privilege that I potentially felt, an accomplishment that I potentially felt. Actually, I was like everybody else around me. There was nothing special about me whatsoever, except that I was carrying a camera and trying to document things in images. But yeah, for sure, there was a sense of fear, huge sense of anxiety around being a photographer. And I would have to hide my camera in and out of the square. Tahrir Square was the space where I felt safe. And the country was so polarized at that point. People fighting to stay in power, other people fighting for change.
Tell me about the woman in the picture with a tear escaping. I was really drawn to that image. It's such a strong picture. Who is she?
Her name is Safiya Abdulaziz Muhammad. Safiya is among a group of women that I met outside the police academy, which sits, in an area we call New Cairo, so outside of the traditional Cairo, the old Cairo that we know. Yeah. And she was there as part of a group of women who were basically outside listening to the proceedings of the trial of former President Mubarak and the Interior Minister Habib al-Adli, who were both on trial for giving orders to shoot and kill protesters. And on that particular day, the judge ordered that Mubarak and the former Interior Minister, they didn't give the orders, and basically, they're kind of free to go, although they remained on jail for other things. So obviously for Safiya and the group of women who were there, Safiya's son was killed by police. So for her and the other group of women whose children also died during the protests, they were left absolutely devastated. Egypt is a very class-based society. And within that class, people like Safiya, who doesn't come from the middle class, but probably comes from the majority class of Egyptians, which is not privileged. She really, at that point, felt devastated. Like, who's going to get my son's rights back? She didn't say he died for nothing, but I wonder if that thought went through her head. Like, he died and nothing's come of it. So I think for, if there's an image, one single image that I would ever isolate from all the photographs I made in Egypt that I go back to often, it's that photograph of Safiya. It says a lot. It's the tear obviously says a lot, but there's also a sense of almost like acceptance in her face. And I think that also says a lot about the Egyptian spirit. Like, even though she just suffered this huge moment of grief of her son dying, but obviously being let down by the system itself, she also kind of accepts it. And that says that she has to move on somehow. So for me, it's an image that really defines the Egyptian spirit, the spirit I saw in the revolution, but the spirit that I also know, that people suffer so much and yet they have to keep going.
The voice of Laura El Tantawi, and she will return later on today in the show. Grab your Garibaldi's, if you'll pardon the expression. A little inspiration from our patrons, our incredible community of supporters who are a part of our Photography Daily Patreon, which is an app and a website where we have over 100 additional shows. I've counted them myself. There's more than that, but my abacus only goes so far. And posts which you can listen to in the Patreon app. Each month you can help if you like. Support this show for the price of a cup of coffee or a roll of HP5, or you can help toward licensing things like the music cost for this show. And each month, to thank our fantastic community, we meet on Zoom and we share our pictures and our stories. And you can see those on the website on the picture post tab. And each week you get an extra diary episode called More at the weekend, which I usually write on a Friday to keep it as current as I can from my week of making pictures. You'll find our Patreon page through the photographydaily.show website. Just look for the orange link that says support, and you'll be able to link straight through. Let's meet a patron, and this week a letter from Susan Larson. Hello, Neil. I'm a relatively new fan of the podcast and now a Patreon supporter. Susan, so soon. I'm very grateful for your support. I'll wear it always. as Morecambe and Wise used to say. You can think about that one. As a fan of the podcast, well, that's even kinder, and I'll put that down, I think, to the wonderful stories exchanged and shared each week, of which you are about to become wonderfully one. I've been avidly listening to you every Saturday when I batch cook our meals for the week. You see, I can't listen to you during the daily photo walk because that's time spent with my husband and photography mentor, and border collie, which is completely fair and absolutely understandable, Susan. Every day we go out with our cameras. When work is busy, we just walk out the door. Other times of the year, we have about 30 different walks within a half hour of our house. 30? Blimey. With the most beautiful landscape you can imagine, not to mention gorgeous spring flowers and fall leaves. I'm relatively new at photography after years and years of accompanying my husband while he had his camera and I carried a book to read. Well, I started with a cell phone camera and the rest is history, see? See, Susan? That's how it starts. Oh, this isn't quite good enough. I need one of those, then I need that. Oh, definitely need this. We have plentiful wildlife here outside the tiny town of Winthrop in Washington State, in USA land, in brackets. Does that work? Yes, I think it does work. Oh, low-flying geese. There we go. Have you got a license for flying that low? That worried the fisherman. Including deer and moose, she says, and cougar and bear and bobcats. We met a moose in the wilderness. Well, 50 feet away. A fascinating experience when our border collie lifted her head, saw the moose just a little way away and decided it was nothing to worry about. Oh, fortunately, the moose decided the same. Yeah, moose. You've got to be careful about moose, haven't you? They can be a tad on the grumpy side. I've seen some videos where they come off best with anything they decide to go up against. There are some fun photos of the moose encounter on my Instagram account from June 2021. Oh, I'll check back for that. We met 4 wildcats too. My God, this is like a zoo. What's going on? And there are rattlesnakes, which we've occasionally encountered, but thankfully they're not particularly aggressive. And the border collie hasn't shown any interest either. Does border collie have a name? Do you have your own version, like nickname, like Sabarkalot? You asked, says Susan, why we love photography. Number one, my husband says, and I agree, that you can literally feel your blood pressure falling when you pick up a camera. 2, I love the total focus. Yes, I know, bad pun. On the here and now. Forget everything else. You're absolutely right there. 3, I love the creativity. I can't paint, but I can take a painterly photo. 4, I love the hunt for the picture. When you are watching and looking for the picture, you see things very differently indeed. I think that's very true. Yes. And you see things perhaps you wouldn't see at all, says Susan. And 5, anything that's a good excuse to be outdoors in nature. Who can complain? Oh, I think you're correct on all 5 there, without a doubt. And finally, the photo I'm sending in is from our daily photo walk. It was taken last week, about half a mile from the house. You can see the North Cascade Mountains in the distance, the neighbour's pond close up and still frozen, the last remains of winter's snow on the trail skirting around the pond to the Aspen Grove. I've taken a photo of this particular scene so many times, so many seasons, and it never, ever gets old. Thank you for keeping me company while I'm cooking every Saturday. I enjoy your photo adventures and your interviews so much. Well, thank you, Susan. And indeed, thank you too for this wonderful insight into your life with photography. And the picture is glorious. This is your backyard, essentially. The fact your neighbour has a pond big enough in the picture to look like a lake. Oh, just wondrous. Ponds and North Cascade Mountains. The only thing my next door neighbour has, Susan, that I get to see each week is an overflowing wheelie bin with the only cascade is a cascade of trash when the wind catches the lid or the trash bin on wheels. Anyway, it's hardly a frozen pond with the North Cascades. Any chance you'd like to adopt me? I'll bring Sabarkalot. I'm sure he'll get on fine with Border Collie. Let me just open this gate, hold on. Right. There's I'm not sure whether to save this story. I might save it. There's a famous dog on telly at the moment, which Sir Barkalot apparently looks like. We've been stopped a couple of times, and Sir Barkalot's even had his photograph taken with somebody. I'll save it. I'm going to do that. Oh, you tease, Neil, you tease. I'll save it for Susan. Susan, that story's coming your way. Maybe not this weekend, maybe next weekend. Right, let's hear a couple of words from the most recent Patreon Zoom meetup, where we did a bit of a round robin on your first picture. That was it's loosely the title, really, because your first picture could be your first sort of pictorial experience, or the first photograph that drove or inspired you. It was quite open. A bit of an open book, this one.
I was in Benidorm that my parents had taken me to for my 18th birthday, and I took a picture of a lady delving into her handbag in the old town in Benidorm with my Chinon Memetron CE5. And I remember thinking at the time, whoa, I love this street stuff. I could really get into this, and I did.
This isn't the first photograph I've ever taken, but I don't remember the ones before this. This is the first one that was memorable. I was at university, actually, and I'd just come across the Cottingley Fairies as a story, and I wanted to replicate an image of me in the woods seeing a fairy. So I cut out Winona Ryder in a tutu from a magazine, stuck a pair of wings onto her, blue tacked her to some foliage in the local woods, smeared some Vaseline on the front of my lens, and then set self-timers and kind of crouched down next to it. And it actually was rather quite convincing, and it's one of the kind of most cherished photographs I had. And then, unfortunately, my parents threw it away when they moved house. So I have no evidence of the image, but it did once exist, I promise you.
My first photo that threw me over the edge was a jellyfish in Miami, Florida. It was the first jellyfish I ever saw, and I actually thought it was a plastic bag, and I thought that there was plastic bags all over the beach, and I almost touched it until I realized it was a jellyfish. But that's what threw me over the edge. That's what got me shooting.
Well, this round for photography for me was actually we're driving across from St. Louis, Missouri, to California, and we're going through the Nevada desert, and the sun was setting, and there was a rainstorm where you didn't see, well, the rain wasn't making it to the ground because it was so dry. And I just took my phone out and started snapping shots, realized, oh God, I can actually do this.
My first photo was taken on my way home from buying my very first camera. So I went out to buy a Nikon D300S, dashed out, and being the little child that I am, I couldn't resist stopping and taking the camera out and taking some photos. So my first photo was of a tree just on the bank. I could, shot up to it, and that was it.
Our patrons, you're a very, very precious part of this show as it builds. Everybody's precious, whether you're a Patreon or not, or patron or not. I always get those two confused, patron. You're part of Patreon, but you're a patron. Yes. Are you confused? Easily done with me, that's for sure. Welcome to the Photowalk. Just you, just me, with our cameras, making a few pictures, spending some time together, doing this thing that we love. No more complicated than that. And of course, as I pepper throughout the show, I would love to hear your stories, where you've been walking, the pictures that you've been making, what you do with your photography, any projects that you've got, anything that you're working on, perhaps something that you'd like some help with. Well, there's, besides you and me, obviously, there are thousands of other people that listen who have fantastic advice to give. So no question too daft. We always say that in our special Facebook group that you're also very welcome to become a part of. Here's a very important letter from Peter Turnbull. He wrote in to studio at photographydaily.show about somebody. He wrote about somebody who, very special, that I'd sadly never had the opportunity to talk with. But Peter, I sense where you are right now and the light and shade of your thoughts. So I'm just going to read the words that you sent me. Hi Neil, it's been a little while since I last wrote, and boy, a lot has happened. First, as you may notice from my email signature, I've had a career change. Well, congratulations, yes. I took redundancy from my corporate gig and have decided to follow my passion, and have a crack at a career in photography. I've shot for 40 years, so not really a novice, and I've run a PR business before, so I've got some experience there. Plus, I've nearly always had jobs that incorporated photography, so I thought there'd never be a better time to go full-time. Hang on, let me just get through this. I've got to cross now. I found the railway at last. I've got to cross it, so concentrate for a moment. Hold on. Anything coming? Red light one way, double amber the other. I think we're okay. Cross, cross, cross. Nice and quick. And through the other gate. I'm focusing, he says, mainly on industrial and corporate work. And I've included a sample of the sort of work that I do. Some fun stuff as well, after all. Photography is still my hobby too, yes. This thing that when you start photographing commercially for a living, taking your pounds, dollars, cents and goats per square inch for a living, doesn't mean that you can't have it as a hobby as well. I separate. I think out my sort of fun Instagram accounts that I have, some of my silly Instagrams and the more serious commercial ones. So yeah, you can have a hobby as well as do it as a career. There's no doubt about that. Now, I'll share his pictures, Peter's pictures today on the show page, so you can see exactly what he means by that. Recently, I, says Peter, and a group of my now photography friends suffered the loss of our mentor, a wonderful Australian photographer, Gina Militia. She was a very well-known and brilliant portrait photographer and did a lot of work with actors, A-listers. And she was also an incredibly generous lady who loved to teach and share her knowledge. She built a community that she called the Goldies. I like that idea, the Goldies. There was a broadcaster in this country, Peter, called Terry Wogan, Sir Terry Wogan, no less. Oh, it's just, I suppose I think you associated one voice, certainly as I was growing up anyway, with breakfast radio. There were the two main networks, or certainly two main BBC networks. One was called Radio 1, the one that I aspired to, and the other one was called Radio 2. Mum wanted to listen to Terry Wogan. This beautiful in every way in terms of his sound, stories that he would weave together. A broadcaster called Terry Wogan on Radio 2, playing this sort of easier listening stuff. Terry, he had sort of a community, I think you could call it, of people that followed him. They were called Togs, which, yes, I know is relevant in some respects as a phrase that photographers call each other, Togs. I know some people don't like Togs. There's this kind of, I don't like Togs. I've never really appreciated why people don't like that expression, they get quite shirty about it. But yeah, Togs in Terry's language anyway, T-O-G, Togs, was they were Terry's old golds. So we got the Goldies and we got the Togs. But anyway, back to the Goldies, Gina's Goldies. Peter says I was one of them. Spent countless hours talking to us. She did, producing tutorials and answering all of our questions. Evidence of how well she cultivated this community came after her passing, with I and other members of the community staying in regular contact, asking each other's advice on everything from lighting to pricing to sharing our images, our failures and our successes, and just generally supporting each other. Gina was quite a young woman, and her sudden passing, which is in February, left a big hole for many of us. I was fortunate in that I found you and your podcast, and it resonated with me. I listen to many photography podcasts, from gear to landscape to portrait, but the Photowalk is unique and the guests are excellent. Well, that's very kind of you. And anyone who has Sean Tucker and Valerie Jardin on speed dial must be doing something right. I'm not so sure they're on speed dial, but they have been themselves very generous toward me and our community, actually, Sean and Valerie, and they're always, what's that expression I heard the other day? Go towards people whose eyes light up when they see you. Now, obviously, when you're phoning somebody, that's not appropriate. But they effectively do that every single time that I contact them. I think I can hear their eyes light up. Anyway, stop your bimbling, Neil. Yes. Right, you didn't say that, Peter, I know. That's me talking to myself. Apologies for the long, rambling email, but this only touches on the extraordinary past 6-month journey that I've personally been on. I promise to forward more images and stories from the land down under. Or should that be down under land? In the meantime, keep walking, keep shooting, and enjoy life. Thank you. As a final thought, as I sat on a beach Thursday past, not far from home, camera and 600mm lens in hand, watching the surf, I had a call from a fellow photographer. He asked what I would be doing and what I would have been doing if I was still in the corporate world. Upon reflecting upon that for a moment, I came to the conclusion that I'm finally doing life right. Yes, from Peter Turnbull. So first up, you'll expect me to be saying around this time that Peter's pictures that he sent are going to be on the show page today. And yes, they most certainly are. Equally, a link to a photographer that I feel, genuinely, actually, really disappointed and sad not to have met or talked with when she was obviously inspiring photographers internationally. Gina Militia in Australia. She passed away, as I say, in February. Suddenly, she inspired a generation of photographers in the country, a quarter of a century behind the lens professionally. It's a fair time to build up great knowledge and great insight, isn't it? Would she have been an interesting, not just photographer, but person to talk with and spend time celebrating this thing that we love on this show? Really, she would have been. Now, Gina had a podcast, So You Want to Be a Photographer, with her friend Valerie Khoo, 374 episodes in 7 years, which was advice-driven, technically business advice as well. And I'd like to pay my own tribute, really, to her, Peter, lamenting that we didn't talk. A few moments, an excerpt, actually, from her great friend, Valerie Khoo, who in the final episode had some personal memories of her special friend and co-host to share.
Amidst all of the high-profile people, I've also watched Gina shoot regular people, business people, people on the street, people in developing countries, people who could not be further from the glitz and glamour of celebrities. And no matter who you were, she made you feel special. There's a quote that she loved, I think it was by Maya Angelou originally, but Gina applied it to her life. Gina was always telling me this quote. She said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And that is very much how Gina applied herself, not only in her photography, but in her dealings with people on a personal level. In photography, even if you were incredibly insecure or nervous, she gave you confidence. She always knew how to get the best out of people. She knew how to lift people up and make them feel good about themselves. As a photographer, she was not only technically spot on, technically brilliant, she just knew how to direct people. And seeing her in action was like seeing this alchemist make everything come together and coordinate everyone and direct people in. She brought this wonderful energy to the shoot.
The voice of Valerie Khoo, and thank you, Valerie, for allowing me to play that out on the show today. I suppose it's a little unusual to be talking about another photographer's podcast, but I don't know. I think that's the beauty of our community here, isn't it? That we look out for each other. And there are some, there are some strong values and messages that you share from the letters that you send in, I think, with the way that Gina thought. And I was looking at her Instagram last night, and there are some words that I'd like to share, actually. I did delve a little way back in the feed, but it's this from her very last post, which was around about a year ago, where I'd like to read, where she said, Gina said, "Do you remember the first time you photographed something just because? No ulterior motive, Not for folio, not for Instagram, not for a client, not to go on the wall, just because the light was just so, or the subject moved you and you wanted to capture what that moment felt like. I'd not done this, said Gina, for a long, long time. I'd fallen into the same trap that many working photographers fall into. I only picked up a camera when somebody was paying me to, or when I felt the need to shoot new folio shoots, or maybe attract new clients. Blimey, Gina, you've described exactly what I was like until I started this podcast. I think I had very similar thoughts and feelings. Gina says I'd forgotten what it felt like to really, really love taking photos. Just like when a relationship starts to go sour, I was going through the motions without the love. The passion had left the building and it was starting to take its toll. I was bored and starting to dislike photography. My work was all starting to look the same and I began shooting on autopilot. I had enough experience to know how to get the shot and deliver what my clients needed, but I just wasn't stretching myself. Shooting personal projects was a game changer for me. I simply photographed the things I loved in a style I love, just because. Gina Militia. Words from Gina. You know, life is fragile. We know that from the news of late. So hopefully those words, some words from her best friend and the letter from Peter will move you to nudge that devil called procrastination to one side. Or you, procrastination, shove over, will you? Go on. I'm making way for somebody with a much chirpier can-do attitude. Go on. Now, funnily enough, the last half hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, I don't know, I wasn't keeping track. In the middle of recording today's Photowalk, I met up with Matt, who I mentioned much earlier on in the show. So this isn't really sequentially working very well. The magic, you're going to have to go with the magic of podcasting at this point, that everything happens in the right order for the right reason. But I met Matt, is it 3 weeks ago? And I met him while I was walking Sir Barkalot, the story I've already told you. And Matt was photographing birds, and we got chatting. I always get chatting. If somebody's holding a camera, for me, it's like, let's have a chat. So we got chatting, and it turns out that Matt makes his pictures for mental health benefits, but it goes much further than that now. I think, yes, initially that was the reason he started to photograph, but now he's, you can really see his eyes, literally, they do, I tell you what, they certainly brighten, they light up when he starts to talk about photographing the birds around the lake where I met up with him. And I want just to play a few moments of inspiration from Matt, because it was absolute joy just to have a chat with him a moment ago. We walked we didn't get a lot of photographs. I was thinking it might be a sort of bird photography fest, but I think they'd all gone off for coffee. But we wanted to have a chat anyway, and I know I'm going to meet with Matt a lot more in the months and years, who knows, to come. But I'd like to play you a few moments from my conversation with Matt. He's not a famous photographer. He doesn't do it for money yet. He does it for that reason, which I think is the purest reason of all. And it's the reason that I mentioned, or Gina mentioned just a moment. I didn't, it was Gina. Gina mentioned a moment ago. Just because.
I try and do this at least 2-3 times a week to get out. If I don't, I start to feel myself kind of take a little bit of a dip.
If you don't photograph?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It really does help me. It really does. And also, going back to the lockdowns, I would start posting photos on like the town's Facebook pages. Yes. And the amount of people, especially the elderly, who would comment thanking me for putting these pictures up was amazing, because they couldn't get out. So it gave them something nice to look at, I guess. And yeah, I think that gave me a lot of pride, and it kind of gave me the drive to continue doing this and trying to better myself to get a better picture. Because I think, especially with having kids as well, whatever happens, further down the line, I want them to see that I've done this, and for them to be proud of me and to see, you know, the type of stuff that I can get. Because you never know, in years to come, some of these birds might not be around. So if they can say, well, my dad got a picture of these, then great.
My newfound friend, Matt. Yes, my new photographic found friend. I'm trying to trip myself up here, as you can probably tell, Matt. And, well, tomorrow, set myself a challenge here. Tomorrow on the Moore Show, you will hear my conversation with Matt in full. I think it's I think it's very inspirational. Somebody who takes up photography really only very recently, and suddenly, boom, life change. Well, it is literally. I'm not being overtly melodramatic about this, but life does change, and his life plans have changed with it, all because of that wonderful little box that we have to make our pictures with. So, but you're going to be hearing more of Matt in the weeks to come, I promise, because he said some very thought-provoking things that I think are most certainly inspirational in and of themselves. So you're going to hear more of Matt as the weeks go along. I'm being buzzed by this aircraft now. You probably heard it a moment ago as well. Obviously doing circuits. Go away. Don't. Oh, turning left towards me now. Turn the other way. Other way. Oh, I'll just keep talking. As we were talking about personal projects a moment ago, thank you for taking on the weekly challenges. Seamless, Neil, seamless, that are being set at the moment on the special shorter Monday edition, which are kind of personal projects, albeit small ones, I guess. Monday's show is simply called The Assignment. Sean Tucker will return on Monday for his second assignment. Now, I recorded 3 with Sean. Pretty sure I did 3 with Valerie as well, possibly 4 actually. And there are some other names to pop up in between in the coming weeks. But Sean Tucker is back on Monday for his second assignment. But this week you've been as amazing as ever. And the show page for episode 291, the assignment set by Valerie, it's absolutely blessed with your work. I actually partook of last week's as well, but I partook of this one. Partaken. Are we doing a Latin lesson? No. And you'll see that on the show page. I made I'm not going to talk about that on the Moore Show as well, where I took the picture and not so much how, but what I saw around myself. I was on a platform. Blackpool's on in the northwest coast. It's a very famous place for holidaymakers. I'm going to say hens and stags, and that would be doing it a big disservice because it's so much more than that, historically, of course. And I made a picture on the 300, was it 80? Oh, I can't remember now, 360, 380 feet up anyway, on the observation deck, which is a 5 centimetre thick piece of glass that, we've got trains out, we've got planes now, we just need the automobiles, we've got the whole set. And I was looking down through this glass and made a picture that worked, I thought, well with the assignment that was set. And you can see that on the show page today. So, are we ready for part 2 of my guest? Yes. You've gathered, or certainly will do, going to the website, which of course is linked to in the show notes, that she is a photographer who really, really values the opportunity to embrace her skills with a camera and creatively with mixed media such as sound, to tell her own stories alongside the commercial commissions. And I found that to be a powerful, powerful message today. So much so that in preparing the diary piece for the Moore Show tomorrow, I started recording some sound to layer with my story of visiting Blackpool, but that's another aside. So let's return to Laura El-Tantawi, who I'm delighted to have spoken with this week as my special guest on the show.
We've been talking about your project, Laura, in the shadow of the pyramids, and how what started as a photo project, or a journey of discovery really about yourself and your identity returning to Egypt, to your homeland, turned into this incredibly potent story of a country finding its new identity during and after the revolution, which you photographed. It's an amazing piece of work, and of course I'll be linking to it in the show notes. But with work like this, how did you, or how do you know when you've got enough that the story was told? Because it wasn't simply a bookend piece where the end of an uprising spells the end of a project. When do we know as photographers where a project ends?
Yeah, the end is always a big question mark. I basically knew that the project came to an end after living and documenting the highs and lows of the revolution. You know, the moments of euphoria, as I explained, but then there were also devastating moments where people were dying. Funerals were happening. I remember a particular moment where I was standing outside the morgue in Cairo, and there were families after lines and lines of people outside. It was August. It was excruciatingly hot. You could literally smell the deteriorating bodies. And, you know, the families were just there, absolutely devastated. And it was all kind of chipping away at that sense of purity and innocence, the innocent Egypt that I had kind of aligned myself to, just because Egypt is a country I mostly knew through childhood memories, really. I only came back to really build an image of Egypt as an adult through photography. And I think realizing that, it really chipped away at my impression of Egypt. And I realized that there's a layer of hate that I never knew was there. And just the bloodshed and the animosity and also the division, the polarization, it became a place where people were looking for allegiances. Are you with us or are you against us? So all of these things kind of made me feel like I don't really have anything to say right now about this. I think I'm done. I didn't have the empathy or understanding that I had before. And for me, these are two very important places to begin to at least open up a space to interrogate photographically. And that's when I felt like I need to close this chapter, because I didn't want to start to make images of hatred or images of things I didn't necessarily understand, because I can't really. And that really became the end.
I would certainly encourage anyone listening to go and look at your films that sit alongside your pictures in this project and others. Very emotionally charged, and certainly spoke to me because I'm interested in sound. But the potency of those still images, particularly in the uprising when we're talking about the initial story, the sounds, you seem to have created echoes alongside this very poetic narration style that you have. It's such a powerful way to tell stories. Tell me about your sound design work and how you came to be making those films.
It was very experimental, really. I just wanted to create the sound of Tahrir Square, but also the memory of Tahrir Square. Yeah. And that's where those echoes and effects, if you want to say, came into play. Because, you know, when you, and I find this with photography also, you know, thinking of an image that you created 10 years ago, it brings back a whole array of memories, but that image doesn't feel or sit with me personally the same way that it did, obviously, when I created it. And so I feel like sound is a really powerful way to bring that feeling around images. And, you know, I've actually wanted to be a film director before I ever wanted to be a photographer. This was originally my plan. I wanted to be a film director. So, you know, working with moving images and sound was something I think I was always going to do. It was just about the timing. And Egypt happened to be the first time that I began to explore that.
Well, it's difficult through just one clip or a short clip to demonstrate the power of these films you create, still images and sound, but the sound design, the narration you bring to it, it all comes together so very well. And, well, here's an excerpt.
This is not the story I set out to tell. My time covering Egypt since 2005, I've never seen the country so polarized and sharply divided across such a clear line. Are you with us or against us? How do you tell a story when the plot keeps changing? How do you feel, have empathy, and photograph when you don't understand what's happening anymore? Am I with them or against them? Every picture I take in Egypt has been part of a life document from my own memory. I photograph life. This is what's always inspired me. Now there's a fire raging. So many people have been killed. I've seen their blood seeping away. Now there's a red mound of hate. This country where for a long time I was seeing good over bad has finally pushed me into an intense darkness. Hope, fear, disappointment, joy, pride. This square has seen it all. I ache when they ache, cry when they cry, try to laugh when they try. In their faces I see my own.
What was the thought process behind the film and the sound design? These echoes of the shouts, the gunfire, it sounds like, the very haunting tones.
I really wanted to give people who look at it, whether it's in an exhibition or even online through a website, just to immerse them in the feeling, what it feels like to have been in Tahrir Square, what it feels like to even think about it right now. When I think about it or when I dream of it, it's not clear. It's always blurry. There's always echoes. There's these visions. Nothing is very clear. So that's the thought process that I had when I was creating this film.
It's absolutely incredible, and it works exactly as you described. So please go and see it. I was absolutely floored by the story of Zahra. The message, an interview with a woman who was captured by men, doused in acid and raped whilst being held captive for months because she disagreed with them on a point of religion.
Yeah, this was a really, really difficult story to tell, but one that I felt had to be told. Yeah. So it was about how do I do it without also necessarily exposing too much of Zahra. And this was not in Egypt. So this was, I had a commission to do a story about Syrian refugees in Spain, in Sicily to be specific. Yeah. And Zahra was among the refugees, not Syrian, obviously in this case, that I met at a house that was housing women. And she told me her story. And for me, obviously, it was so powerful. And, when you meet people also face to face, I feel like that becomes a responsibility. Like, she was being truthful and honest with me and telling me all this information. And now I have to do something with it. And I had to bring it out to the world. One of the ways you did it, it sounds to me like a hydrophone capturing the sounds of the water below the surface. Well, again, it was, the idea of that a lot of the refugees that arrive in Spain tend to do it by boat. Yeah. So it was looking at, at water and, again, creating sort of a really surreal, dreamlike, but in this case, kind of haunting also, feeling around her experience, and then layering that with her own voice, telling her story of what happened. That was my basic thinking, really. I just wanted to create something that was really simple because her story is so powerful in and of itself. Yeah. I didn't want to interfere with that. I just wanted to create something that made it visually accessible and for people just to take in and listen to. As a photographer, how do you choose your projects? I know you said you were working on a commission in that particular case, but I know you don't choose all your projects like that, do you? No, and even this is something I did on the side with the commission. They never really used that, but this is something I just did because I felt like it had to be told. For me, it really has to be something that speaks to me, and it has to be something that somehow relates to my own history, my own narrative, something I understand, but also perplexes me, something I have a sense of empathy towards, and something that I just feel like I have something to say about it. Because I don't have something to say about everything in the world, even though I'm an opinionated person, but I'm not the right person to tell every kind of story. I only can tell very specific stories, and I can tell them really well. And it took a long time for me to realize that. But, I'm not someone that, for example, will go now to Ukraine and photograph Ukraine and the events there and what was happening. It's not my story to tell. So I think it's important to know for me that if I just feel even a tiny inkling that this is something I'm curious about and I feel like I have something to say about it, then that's something I'll pursue. Tell me about I'll Die For You. It's your latest project. Very pertinent subject right now. Study the fate of humans and land intertwined, as you say. Yeah, I'll Die For You is something I've been doing since 2008, actually. It began in India when I went to India for the first time. And absolutely, I was always really just hypnotized by the images I was seeing out of India, the color, the energy, everything. And I always wanted to go to India and create my own images. So I went as a tourist. And when I came back a few months later, I read this article about this epidemic of farmer suicides in India. And it really piqued my interest because it kind of confronted me with an image of India that wasn't the one that I saw. You know, for me, India is a country of endurance. It's people work really, really hard to survive in order to avert death in the same way that I see Egypt. So in that sense, I could relate to it. And it really opened up the space for me to investigate a lot of things. You know, of course, the relationship between man and land, but my own grandfather's relationship with land. He was a farmer and, you know, he suffered many things with President Nasser's regimes about splitting land and dividing land between farmers. And he eventually sort of died heartbroken really over his land. So for me, you know, he's someone I never met. And he was always kind of like a figure hovering in the background, especially with my dad always telling me I resemble him so much. You know, I was like, this is, you know, I kind of saw my grandfather, and then I just wanted to kind of investigate this further and understand what was happening really. Why were people committing suicide? So India was the first country, and then I realized there's something much deeper here. And I need to go to my own grandfather's village and photograph there because he was really the inspiration. And now it's become a global project where I'm looking at basically the challenges that small farming communities are facing. And these challenges, obviously global warming is the common denominator for all of them. But in each country, there's different challenges. So in the Palestinian territories, there's the politics and obviously, you know, farmers being stripped of their land. In Egypt, there's overpopulation. In the UK, there's Brexit and COVID and whatever other challenges may come. And mental health issues obviously are major among farming communities. So I'm really trying to dig deeper to do something that really shows, you know, these challenges that farmers are facing. You know, we put food on our table, but we don't really contemplate where it comes from, the journey that it went through, the hands that dealt it.
You talk about being on a journey, finding your photographic voice, finding a language. Do you think you now have, Laura? Or does it always change?
I think I found the language, but I'm actually in a place right now in my photographic practice where I'm also a bit frustrated with that language, and I'm just really trying to find a way to move forward from it because I don't want to keep doing what I'm doing. I think after In the Shadow of the Pyramids, people kind of expected that I would go out and do every series I do in this way.
Yes.
Blurry images, kind of the same sort of perspective. And then Beyond Here's Nothing came and people were completely like, what is this? What is happening here? And then A Star in the Sea came and they were like, well, what is this? So I think, you know, I want to keep pushing myself to continue to push my practice forward and to continue to really see how far I can go. Whether it's the still image, a moving image, sound, all of these things, I think, are tools that can really allow us to tell better and more powerful stories and bring the narrative closer to the audience as well. So I'm really investigating all these different layers and always really trying to see what I can do. But it has to work with the story itself. It can't just be forced upon the narrative. It really has to make sense.
Awards and ambassadorialships and those sorts of the trinkets of success. What do they mean to you?
For me, I look at them as sort of a pat on the back as, you know, you're on the right path. You've done something. We believe in you and we want to support you in your journey. So I think in that sense, they're important. And they also give you credibility, to be completely honest. We're in a business that's very, very competitive. And we're in a business where if you get certain grants that have big names or if you're aligned with a brand, then that gives you credibility and you may get more commissions. So I think they're important in that sense. But I think they also come when the time is right for you. You know, I may have applied for certain grants before and I never got them. And it's because the time wasn't right. So I think, you know, when I do a lot of teaching as well, and I always try to tell students that don't try to rush things, just take things as they come and take time, enjoy the journey.
Just returning to the film you made, In the Shadow of the Pyramids, it was an interesting bit it was about 2/3 through, I wrote this down, that every picture you made or make, in this case Egypt, is part of a life documentary. You photograph life, and quote again, this is what has always inspired me. And I wonder if that's what we're all doing, really, Laura. We dress it with names, we label ourselves as genres, but perhaps our pictures are quite simply a documentary of our lives.
Well, absolutely. I mean, what else is more inspiring than life?
Yeah.
And just seeing life moving in different directions and seeing how we all perceive life so differently because our experiences are so unique and so different. I think this is the most inspiring aspect of it. And actually, you've really peeled the layers on it because nobody has ever really looked at it in this way. People think, oh, you photograph conflict, you photograph sports, you photograph this, but actually we're all photographing the exact same thing. And that's really powerful.
Laura El Tantawi. Oh, just a moment ago, there was the beautiful cuckooing. I should have had my friend Matt here. He'd have known exactly probably what that cuckoo was. He'd have been able to tell me the colour just from the sound. Or maybe not yet. Maybe. I don't know. Matt, would you? You could, maybe. I don't know. For links to Laura's work and other photographers that we've mentioned, plus pictures from your photo walks, follow the link in the podcast player app, which will take you to today's show notes, and you'll see all sorts of goodies in there. If you are a patron, it's the More Show tomorrow, and I'll tell you what's on that after the play-out song. First up, though, this week's PS, which is from Gina Militia, which I thought was very relevant, very appropriate this week. Something I found on her website, and Arnold Newman, who she references. The best photos come from the heart, not the camera, so says Gina. And I completely agree with her. And she also quotes Arnold Newman, which I think, partnered with Gina, is perfect for today's postscript for you to think about. A lot of photographers think that if they buy a better camera, they'll be able to take better photographs. A better camera won't do a thing for you if you don't have anything in your head or in your heart. And on that note, let's think more about our picture making and enjoy making some final frames together today as we walk on this photo walk together. Now, over the last couple of weeks, there are some very close friends, both of mine and of the show, who've lost somebody particularly special, in particular, actually, their fathers. Now, you know me with my own thoughts about that when it comes to my late father. So without sounding, well, in any way trite, I hope with my nostalgic sign-off, I just wanted to pass on sincerely my love to you. And I know we've been talking, but I was thinking today that the play-out song shouldn't just be that music that we make our final frames to, but also a song where we can reflect. And I think for Gina too, following Peter's very heartfelt letter, it's a beautiful song from Andrew Word, and it's called Between the Days.
See the light of the stars, hear the sound of the unseen in the empty fall, in the silence listen, may it lift your heart and move your feet to run again. May you wander far, you will not be lost within. And you'll see the light, though the darkness seems so strong. In the deepest night, let love lead you home. Come and rest your head. Here time is an ocean, peace and grace. Mercy's born between the days, and you'll see the light, though the darkness seems so strong in the deepest night. Let love lead you home, and you'll see the light, though the darkness seems so strong in the deepest night. Let love lead you home. Let love lead you home. Home is never far. There is nothing you should fear at all. Though the way is hard, I will never, never leave you, Lord.
Andrew Word and Between the Days. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Laura El Tantawi, Marley Davis, John Carmichael, and of course the voice of Valerie Koo, a clip from the final podcast with Gina Militia that I've featured. And also those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow is the More Diary show. It's your own weekend oasis of a little extra for your kind support, and we're going to be talking, amongst other things, harmless obsessions, like what we do, I suppose, with our cameras, greasy fish and chips and the sound of Blackpool, making pictures on the prom, and also you will be hearing from my new friend Matt, somebody that I met on the walk, who has quite the story about why he photographs, and I want to share that with you on The More Show. Monday, we're back with a new assignment, the second from Sean Tucker. If you like the music you hear, it's on the incredible artlist.io. Production assistance from Neil Ford and Emily Renier, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you, and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.